I've gone over J.K. Rowling stuff 2 times before. Both times she did some stuff that seemed to me to be pretty transphobic. And here we have it. We have the TERF Manifesto. That might be a little bit uncharitable of me. I haven't actually read it. I have not read a single word of J.K. Rowling's essay. I've heard other people talk about it. I've even seen other people's videos on it, but I myself have not careened through the entire thing. But I'm probably going to make a guess at its contents. It is probably going to. Here's my guess before going into it. It's probably never going to say, I don't think trans women are women, but it will go over a bunch of shit saying stuff like, I just believe sex is real. I don't want women's identities invalidated. We all used to agree on the definition of womanhood, and a bunch of other sort of tangential arguments that don't meaningfully address the central question here. It's the exact same thing that neo-Nazis do when they say race is real. We all know what that means, doesn't it? Well, sure, the idea of race exists. Nobody's denying that. We all know the idea exists. It's a social construct, but I mean, it exists. But when Nazis say race is real, that's not actually what they're saying. They're saying that there are discrete, concrete racial differences and that some are better and some are worse. That is a thing they say. Let's get into it. Is that easy for you guys to read? There we go. Very nice. This isn't an easy piece to write for reasons that will shortly become clear, but I know it's time to explain myself on an issue surrounded by toxicity. Surrounded by toxicity, but on which end? I write this without any desire to add to this toxicity. Nice. For those who don't know, last December I tweeted my support for Maya Forstater, a tax specialist who'd lost her job for what were deemed transphobic tweets. She took her case to an employment tribunal, asking the judge to rule on whether a philosophical belief that sex is determined by biology is protected in law. Judge Taylor ruled that it wasn't. Already, we're full of dog whistles. First of all, this is wrong. Maya Forstater's employment was done on a year-by-year basis. You renew a contract. Her employer decided not to review her contract, or not to renew her contract. One of the reasons they didn't do so was because of her inflammatory social media presence. You see, Maya Forstater was part of a public organization, not a little business, but somebody where she publicly represented the interests of the business that she was a part of. And as a public representative, she was aggressively transphobic online, dead naming and misgendering people deliberately, arguing with trans activists, so on and so forth. I made a book. I'm not a book, sorry. I read the word book in chat and I said that. I made a video on it. It was pretty bad. Secondly, the judge was not asked to rule on the philosophical belief that sex is determined by biology. Everyone agrees sex is determined by biology. We're arguing whether gender was determined by biology. Oh yeah, and apparently Maya was also creating a hostile workplace. So already this is dishonest. But if you guys want an answer, this isn't a matter of thought crime here. Maya Forstater was engaging in behavior that was bad optics for the organization that she worked for, creating a hostile work environment, and even if a belief that you hold you believe to be true or philosophical, that doesn't mean that it doesn't necessarily violate employment guidelines. For example, if you believe that blacks in America have a lower IQ than whites in America, which is a factually true statement, you couldn't go to a workplace and keep saying that with your black coworkers around. You couldn't do it. If you run around your workplace like, hey, how you and your lower IQ doing, my black friend? Did you know there's a 13-point difference on average between your people and my people? The technical correctness of the statements that you're making have nothing to do with whether or not they're contributing to a hostile work environment. And in this case, Maya was. The judge ruled easily against Maya, and she lost her job. Easy peasy. My interest in trans issues predated Maya's case by about 2 years, during which I followed the debate around the concept of gender identity closely. I've met trans people, I've read sundry books, blogs, and articles by trans people, gender specialists, intersex people, psychologists, safeguarding experts, social workers, and doctors, and followed the discourse online and in traditional media. On one level, my interest in this issue had been professional because I'm writing a crime series set in the present day and my fictional female detective is of an age to be interested in and affected by these issues herself. Oh, I can't wait for that one. The fictional female detective in a crime thriller, and then she sees an advert. She snorts. Men can't be women, and then the book continues or something like that. But on another, it's intensely personal, as I'm about to explain. All the time I've been researching and learning, accusations and threats from trans activists have been bubbling in my Twitter timeline. This was initially triggered by a like. Okay? When I started taking an interest in gender identity and transgender matters, I began screenshotting comments that interested me, as a way of reminding myself what I might want to research later. On one occasion, I absentmindedly liked instead of screenshotting. That single like was deemed evidence of wrongthink, and a persistent low level of harassment began. Oh my god, that is the weakest excuse. I was investigating trans issues by screenshotting transphobic tweets, and I accidentally liked one, and also, whoops, turns out I also have all the same views as the transphobic person whose tweet I accidentally liked. This would only be a compelling counter-argument if J.K. Rowling was not herself a transphobe. You can't say like, oh, well, I was accidentally looking at some race realist posts and I accidentally liked one, and then people misrepresented me by assuming the like was indicative of my values. By the way, race is real, 1488, 1350. Like, you can't do that. You can't hold the same view as the person you're saying that you're being misrepresented for having a liked tweet of. Also, this wrongthink shit. I love the way conservatives have begun to appropriate the language of Orwell, a socialist, to describe anytime anyone dislikes things they do. This, anytime a person uses the term wrongthink, you know for a fucking fact their views are indefensible, because the only defense they have of their views is that because it's a view, it should be something they can't attack. That's all they have. That's their only argument. Oh, you're criticizing me for my opinions? That's like that book I haven't read. Months later, I compounded my accidental like crime, the fucking snowflakery, by following Magdalene Burns on Twitter. Magdalene, just so you guys know, Magdalene Burns is an insane fucking transphobe. Magdalene was an immensely brave young feminist and lesbian. I don't know what she did that was brave other than going in front of her webcam and making transphobic arguments, who was dying of an aggressive brain tumor. I followed her because I wanted to contact her directly, which I succeeded in doing. However, as Magdalene was a great believer in the importance of biological sex, ooh, nice slippery. What do you mean, importance of biological sex? Again, with that slippery language right there. Importance of Nobody says biological sex isn't a thing. We're always doing this. The TERFs are always doing this shit. Just say it. Just say you don't think you can change your gender. Just say the actual thing you believe in. Yeah, Magdalene Byrne was an obscenely hateful woman, and the world is better without her. She was just a bigot. I'm fine with her death as much as I would be fine with the death of any Klansman. Like, she was just like a bigot. That was her online presence. She wasn't some like brave like hero of feminism who also on the side had some views on sex and gender. That was what she did online. She was just a transphobe. And she didn't believe lesbians should be called bigots for not dating trans women with penises. Cool, an opinion held by the majority of the trans community. As somebody who's gone over Magdalene Burns' content, that was not the extent of her beliefs. Magdalene Burns was also a Nazi. She said Antifa was paid by the Jews. Really? Is that true? Oh, wow. Back in 2017, here's Magdalene calling a Blair White him. That's pretty impressive. If you're misgendering Blair White, like, you're far off. Like, Ariel Scarcella's a TERF. Blair is a TERF. So if you're misgendering, like, Blair, like, that's the whole, Blair is supposed to be, like, the one actual trans woman, you know? I don't see anything on Antifa here. It might be true. I would just have to, like, look more into it. That's incredible. Ariel Scarcella is actually looking like relatively... Trans women are men, though. It shouldn't be controversial to state that simple fact. Yeah, see, like, J.K. Rowling will never represent Magdalene's views the way they actually are. Here, I think? Here, let me take a look. I'm just interested to see if that's the case. This doesn't necessarily mean Nazi. The George Soros conspiracy theories are just pretty conservative. Like, it's just pretty common conservative trash. Um, but yeah, still, I mean, just broad, like, conservatism. The gay Stapo never rests. Gay Stapo? Because she's gay. Anyway. Dots were joined in the heads of Twitter trans activists, and the level of social media abuse increased. I mentioned all this only to explain I knew perfectly well what was going to happen when I supported Maya. Um, I must have been told on my fourth or fifth. I must have been on my fourth or fifth cancellation by then. Honey, you tell me. I expected the threats of violence and be told I was literally killing trans people with my hate. Oh yeah, you are. The belief that trans women aren't real women and that trans men aren't real men is the like most defining factor in the suicidality of young trans people. And since those are the beliefs that you're signal boosting to literally millions of people, you're contributing directly to their suicides. Like that's not like some flippant, like esoteric theory driven connection. That's just hard facts, honey. And of course, for my books to be burned, although one particularly abusive man told me he composted them. Okay. What I didn't expect in the aftermath of my cancellation was the avalanche of emails and letters that came showering down upon me. This is largely irrelevant, the overwhelming majority of which were positive, supporting, and grateful. This came from a cross section of kind, empathetic, and intelligent people, some of them working in fields deal with gender dysphoria and trans people. Okay, so this doesn't have anything to do with the actual concerns. They're worried about the dangers to young people, gay people, and about the erosion of women's and girls' rights. Interesting, considering women's and girls' rights aren't being eroded even slightly by the existence of trans people. How are gay people being affected? How are young people being affected? You should be very specific. You know, I see TERFs do that a lot. We have concerns about the well-being of women. Okay, what concerns? Let's talk about specific concerns. We have concerns about the well-being of young people, you know? They don't commit to any actual positions. And they shouldn't, because the data is not with them on this. I'd step back from Twitter. Oh, wait. Above all, they're worried about a climate of fear that serves no one, least of all trans youth. Well, trans youth are actually hurt most by suicidality, which is directly contributed to by the views that you're posting. So I wouldn't let them on your lips. I'd stepped back from Twitter for many months, both before and after tweeting support for Maya, because I knew it was doing nothing good for my mental health. I only returned because I wanted to share a free children's book during the pandemic. Immediately, activists who clearly believed themselves to be good, kind, and progressive people swarmed back into my timeline, assuming a right to police my speech. This snowflakery, dude. Just you were criticized. Jesus Christ. Can you imagine if everyone acted this way? TERFs are such babies, dude. I just tweeted a scientifically illiterate transphobic opinion and people got mad at me, swarming. They assume they have the right to police my free speech. Like, holy shit. Dial it back a notch. They accused me of hatred. Fair. Call me misogynistic slurs. I mean, that's gonna happen if you're a massive public figure with millions of followers. I have far fewer followers than you, and I've been called many things. Above all, as every woman involved in this debate will know, TERF. I take issue with the idea that TERF is something you only call women, the implication being that only women can be feminists, unless they think only women could be trans exclusionary or radical. The one biggest TERF debate that I've had on my channel is with a man, and I called him a TERF. I don't know how, like, this isn't a misogynistic thing. If you didn't already know, and why should you, TERF is an acronym coined by trans activists, which stands for TERF. In practice, a huge and diverse cross-section of women are currently being called TERFs, okay, and the vast majority have never been radical feminists, okay? Examples of so-called TERFs range from the mother of a gay child who is afraid I don't care about these anecdotes in a world of billions of people, who is afraid their child wanted to transition to escape homophobic bullying, okay, to a hitherto totally unfeminist older lady who's vowed never to visit Marks and Spencer again because they're allowing any man who says they identify as a woman, so a woman, the mask slips for a moment, into the women's changing rooms. Ironically, radical feminists aren't even trans exclusionary. They include trans men in their feminism because they were born women. Oh yeah, I'm sure trans men really appreciate that, being allowed into women's spaces. I'm sure we're not exclusionary. We know trans men are actually women, so we let them into our spaces. The trans men, they appreciate that. Very good. Very big brain. Smooth brain, head empty, no thoughts. Yeah, very supportive. Thank you, J.K. Rowling. But accusations of turfery have been sufficient to intimidate many people, institutions, and organizations I once admired, like who are cowering before the tactics of the playground, just literally just being criticized. Literally just being like, holy shit. They call us transphobic. They say I hate trans people. What next? They'll say you've got fleas? What? Speaking as a biological woman, a lot of people in positions of power really need to grow a pair. Nice meme. Which is doubtless literally possible, according to the kind of people who argue that clownfish prove humans aren't a dimorphic species. What? I don't know what like shower argument J.K. Rowling is concluding in this. Yeah, isn't she supposed to be a writer? Is this British humor? So why am I doing this? Why speak up? Why not quietly do my research and keep my head down? Well, I've got 5 reasons for being worried about the new trans activism, and I decided I need to speak up. Well, you don't need to have reasons to be worried. You don't think trans women are women or trans men are men. So you don't need to be worried about activism. You can just call all of them delusional or mentally ill. Like you the position of being concerned with activism only makes sense if you don't. This would be like a Nazi saying they're concerned with like BLM for 5 reasons, you know? Like, okay, that's great. We know why you're concerned, and the reason why you have that concern invalidates your concerns. Like, would you let a race realist come in to have like a top, like give a dissertation on the problems with like integrating schools? We know why they have those arguments. They're made irrelevant by the bias. First, I have a charitable trust that focuses on alleviating social deprivation in Scotland. What? With a particular emphasis on women and children. Among other things, my trust supports projects for female prisoners and for survivors of domestic and sexual abuse. I also fund medical research into MS, a disease which behaves very differently in men and women. Okay. It's been clear to me for a while that the new trans activism is having a significant impact on many of the causes I support because it's pushing to erode the legal definition of sex and replace it with gender. No. Wait. What the fuck does this have to do with anything? So you think that like doctors are going to go like, oh, radical gender ideology has obliterated our understanding of sex. We will no longer differentiate our treatment based on the physiology of the people we're treating. What? This doesn't happen. This doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Nobody does this. Doctors will and must always do what is most efficacious for them to do. That is their pledge. That's the Hippocratic Oath, to do no harm. That has nothing to do with ideology. Doctors, by the way, are often some of the most virulent supporters of trans rights, which is the reason why the DSM and its equivalent published in the World Health Organization both validate the existence and validity of trans people, as do medical organizations that treat transgender people regarding their psychiatric and their transition needs. Because doctors have already decided what the answer is on this one. You people are just taking long to catch up. This is a completely invalid concern, which is why she didn't actually specifically outline a problem. The second reason is that I'm an ex-teacher and the founder of a children's charity, which gives me an interest in education and safeguarding. Like many others, I have deep concerns about the effect the trans rights movement is having on both. What concerns? This is supposed to be where you list the concerns, but there are no concerns listed here. Remember, guys, the TERF Manifesto. I have concerns about the safety. Look, there's nothing. You're not saying anything. You're just saying you have concerns. I'm worried about medical treatment. I'm worried about education. Like, okay. The third is that, as a much-banned author, I'm interested in freedom of speech and have publicly defended it even unto Donald Trump. Good thing nobody's taking away your freedom of speech at all. So this is a completely invalid point. I'm sorry, has the state of England taken away... guys, feel free to inform me. I'm sorry, has the state of England in any way, shape, or form arrested or brought charges against her for any of the things that she said with regards to trans people? No? The answer is no, it hasn't? Oh. Well, guess that point's a bunk. The fourth is where things start to get truly personal. Oh shit, are we going to do some deep dives here? I'm concerned about the huge explosion in young women willing to transition and also about the increasing numbers who seem to be detransitioning, returning to their original sex. Very low numbers, by the way, incredibly low numbers. No data suggests that this is a significant number of people. Because they regret taking steps that have, in some cases, altered their bodies irrevocably and taken away their fertility. Okay? Then I guess we had better continue working on our research to accurately and reasonably determine who is most in need of transition and who actually wants to transition. You know, what the medical researchers are already doing. It's like a fraction of the percent of trans people who detransition. And by the way, the most of the people who detransition for reasons that aren't associated with regret. For example, sometimes they'll detransition because they no longer have the money to continue affording hormone therapy. Sometimes they'll detransition because they're actually happy with the state that their body is in. Sometimes they'll detransition because they're actually okay with continuing to have a penis even if they present as a woman. There are so many ways in which detransitioning can be expressed in non-regret based ways. There are many socioeconomic reasons, and most of the time it's not a regret thing. So we're talking about a fraction of a fraction. So we're talking about a fraction people who detransition due to regret, of a fraction people who detransition, of a fraction transgender people of the population over which we're expressing concerns here. The huge explosion of people who are detransitioning, but yeah, I know. Most people probably aren't aware, I certainly wasn't until I started researching this issue properly, that 10 years ago the majority of people wanting to transition to the opposite sex were male. The ratio is now reversed. The UK experienced a 4,400% increase in girls being referred to transitioning treatment. Yeah, because they opened up gender clinics. What the fuck did you think was going to happen? If your country didn't have any state-lined process for transition before, and then they open up that process to people, the number of people who are going to go up are whoa, whoosh, wow, yeah. And that's not 4,400% relative to trans girls, by the way, because when she says girls here, she means trans boys. She's just saying relative to the previous rate. Yeah, no shit. The NHS opened up gender clinics, so of course the rate increases. This is being given public attention and public support now. Autistic girls are hugely overrepresented in their numbers. Okay. Do you think there might be a possibility that autism is related, has a correlative set of characteristics to some of the social factors that might be associated with gender dysphoria, as an age, as a young person? Is that perhaps a possibility? Is it possible that the social awkwardness of autism might in part be caused by a disconnect from the mind and body or discomfort with your social presentation? I like how she throws this out there with no data or accompanying interpretation. Because she doesn't have any. She just throws it out. It's meant to sound spookier. The implication is that these poor autistic girls, so they're trans boys, are being led witlessly to the gender clinics, and they're too autistic to know that they're destroying their bodies forever. But we'll see. We'll see if the data pans out. The same phenomenon has been seen in the US. In 2018, American physician and researcher Lisa Littman set out to explore it. In an interview, I love this one! She said, parents online were describing a very unusual pattern of transgender identification where multiple friends and even entire friend groups became transgender identified at the same time. I would have been remiss had I not considered social contagion and peer influences as potential factors. Littman mentioned Tumblr, Reddit, Instagram, and YouTube as contributing factors to rapid onset gender dysphoria, where she believes that in the realm of transgender identification, youth have created particularly insular echo chambers. Her paper caused a furor. Do you know why that paper caused a furor? Because it was hack data, not peer-reviewed, but the issues go way deeper than that. It's a good thing that I have an IQ of 45, so I'm capable of reading the article and actually immediately understanding what's wrong with it. But for those of you in chat who haven't read it, I'd be happy to read the bullet points right here. This journal, we can confirm, Lisa Littman, August 16th, 2018. Commonly cited by transphobes to indicate transness spreads socially and that exposure to trans material might encourage youth to be trans. Rapid onset gender dysphoria. This is bad data. The study polled parents, not children. And those polls of the parents were taken on sites like Fourth Wave Now, Transgender Trend, and Youth Trans Critical Professionals. The researcher found parents and polled them online with no control variables from TERF websites. They sought out transphobic websites and asked the transphobes there how they thought children were getting along with regards to transgender people. That would be like going to fucking poll and taking a random poll there and using it as a dissertation on race relations in America. That's not an exaggeration. That is literally what it would be like. This data is laughably bad, and it is disrespected in every single academic space in which it is brought up. Her paper caused a furor. She was accused of bias and spreading misinformation about transgender people, subjected to a tsunami of abuse in a concerted campaign to discredit her and her work. Good! The journal took the paper offline and re-reviewed it before republishing it. However, her career took a similar hit to that suffered by Maya. Damn! Wow! Lisa Littman had dared challenge one of the central tenets of trans activism. No, it was just bad data. It was just bad data. That's it. Researchers who engage in this kind of propagandizing should have all their fucking credibility snatched from them. It got republished. I don't know about the circumstances. I imagine the journal that published it probably doesn't have super high standards. It's bad data. It's terrible data. She deserves to be discredited. But I love this line at the end here. Lisa Littman. Oh, it is peer-reviewed? I don't like it, but technically it is, just FYI. Oh, interesting. I wonder what led to it being peer-reviewed. Well, that doesn't actually refer to the quality of the data within, and I invite any of you who has ever read a paper before to go over the contents of that paper. I wonder who peer-reviewed it. Maybe they got, like, their, like, brother or something? Oh yeah, and the study concludes that there was no evidence for the claims being made in it. It was only studying public opinion. The study doesn't even make the claims J.K. Rowling is interpreting it to have made. But you know where I've heard this before? Lisa Littman had dared challenge one of the central tenets of trans activism. Do you know where I've heard that before? In the video that a race realist neo-Nazi had made, they cited articles written by race realists which severely over-exaggerated the IQ gap between white and black people. Because their articles were extremely poorly made, they were only able to post them on self-published journals, meaning that they don't have to go through the same process of accreditation and review that normally goes into publishing to a journal. And do you know what they would say? These researchers dared to challenge one of the central tenets of Jewry and race denialism. And that's why everyone got so mad about it. They got mad because the truth was being revealed and their propagandizing, their Jew lies were being taken down. If you think I'm exaggerating, that's what I hear all the time from these people. And this is that language. Anti-intellectualism couched in the defense of bigots who will use bad data to defend their points. The argument of many current trans activists is that if you don't let a gender dysphoric teenager transition, they will kill themselves. I mean, sorry, bucko, the data on this one, I mean, I can pull that data up too. That's also in my research document. In an article explaining why he resigned from Tavistock, I notice how we're not posting data here. We're only posting quotes from disgruntled ex-employees. In an article explaining why he resigned from Tavistock, an NHS gender clinic in England, psychiatrist Marcus Evans stated that claims that children will kill themselves if not permitted to transition do not align substantially with any robust data or studies in this area, nor do they align with the cases I have encountered over data as a psychotherapist. Interesting that you would cite that person's opinion and not an actual study. How about we look at an actual study? That would be good, I think. Da-na-na-na. That's why I keep this thing around. Let's see if we can find it. It might take me just a moment. There are quite a few citations here on transgender people. Let's see. Where's that meta-analysis? It was a What We Know link. Here we go. Gender transition has a positive effect on trans people. Ah, here we go. Here is a meta-analysis of 56. Oh, I'm really sorry. 72 studies now. They added to it. on the effects that transition has on gender dysphoric people. And wouldn't you know it, the overwhelming majority of them cite positive outcomes, and a few of them cite neutral outcomes. Below are 51 studies that said it improves the well-being, 4 studies which contain mixed or null findings, no studies, none, which say it negatively affects them. So this is what we call a slam dunk in the data world. Okay, I'm using my sociology degree right now, and I'm conclusively verifying that this is what we would like to call a slam dunk. All of these are themselves peer-reviewed in reputable journals. You can go over every single individual piece of data if you want, but you would be wasting your time. I'm right. So, nice little quote. I wonder why this guy resigned from Tavistock. Maybe we can find some interesting information on him. Trans-identified children need therapy, not just affirmation and drugs. They need all of those things, if that's determined by the medical professionals to be what they need. That's why you resigned, because your opinions were out of line with the medical consensus on the issue. That's a pretty good reason to resign from something, by the way. If you're a doctor and you're disagreeing with the overwhelming totality of research in a given subject, that's probably a pretty decent reason for you to shut the fuck up and leave the field, you know? I appreciate his willful sacrifice to never again, open his mouth on this particular subject. But that's okay, we can keep going. Feels over reals, baby. That's the TERF fucking slogan. The writings of young trans men reveal a group of notably sensitive and clever people. The more of their accounts of gender dysphoria I've read, with their insightful descriptions of anxiety, disassociation, eating disorders, self-harm, and self-hatred, the more I've wondered whether, if I had been born 30 years later, I too might have tried with transition. No! The anxiety, disassociation, eating disorders, self-harm, and self-hatred are caused by the gender dysphoria. Just having anxiety, depression, eating disorder, self-harm, and self-hatred doesn't make you trans. People aren't showing up at gender clinics because they're anxious and thinking they might secretly want to change their entire lives and live as a different gender. The reason they have these things is because of people like you, J.K. Rowling. This behavior is caused by people like you. Do you want some evidence to that claim? I would love to provide it. Keep this document on hand at all times. Suicidality. There we go. Whew. That looks nice. Where was that message right there on suicidality? Oh, gender-based victimization, discrimination, bullying, violence, being rejected by the family, friends, and community. Hey, just so you know, being rejected by the family, friends, and community means rejecting their gender identity. Just to be clear, because I know people like J.K. Rowling will do this love the sinner, hate the sin bullshit, where they like, no, I love you as a biological man, but you're not a woman. If you think that means acceptance, it's not. Rejection means rejection of their identity. Harassment by intimate partners, family members, police, and public, discrimination, ill treatment by the healthcare system are the major risk factors that influence the suicidal behavior amongst transgender persons. There's somewhere in here, there is a piece of data on how the risk of suicidality decreases to 1/13th the previous risk for transgender youth if their parents just, look at that. Analysis of the ways in which parental support affect elements of disadvantage experienced by transgender youth. Most notably, strong parental support decreases the likelihood of a suicide attempt within the past year from 57% to just 4%. 4%! 4! That's actually closer to 1/14th than 1/13th. 1/14th the chance! 53 percentage point drop. 4% chance of a suicide attempt in the past year. Fuck it, that's almost like a regular amount for a teenager these days. But you know what the parent has to do? Support their gender identity. That's the thing they have to do. I sure hope she keeps blundering into more false claims that I can disprove with data that I have. The allure of escaping womanhood would have been huge. No, it wouldn't have. I struggled with severe OCD as a teenager. If I'd found community and sympathy online I couldn't find in my immediate environment, I believe I could have been persuaded to turn myself into the son my father had openly said he would have preferred. This isn't happening online. People don't go online and say, like, hey, I have OCD and anxiety, and then people are like, you should consider transitioning your gender. That doesn't happen. It's not happening. This is really weird. JK, if you're secretly a self-hating trans man, don't take that shit out on other people, okay? What is this? Like, I've noticed trans people today are depressed. I was depressed when I was a kid. I wonder if trans people had been a thing back then, I would have tried to be trans. Like, what the fuck kind of logic is this? When I read about the theory of gender identity, I remember how mentally sexless I felt in youth. I remember Colette's description of herself as a mental hermaphrodite, and Simone de Beauvoir's words, "It is perfectly natural for the future woman to feel indignant at the limitations posed upon her by her sex. The real question is not why she should reject them, the problem is rather to understand why she accepts them." I don't know what the fuck any of that has to do with gender identity. As I didn't have a realistic possibility of a man. How much of this is just going to be her wishing she was brave enough to transition when she was a kid? What am I supposed to? What am I going over on this? What is this? This is nothing to do with any data on transgender people. This is cope. I don't care. I want to be clear here. I know transition will be a solution for some gender dysphoric people, but you won't validate their identities, will you? Although I'm also aware through extensive research what studies, if you had conducted extensive research, you would not be citing the things you're citing now. That studies have consistently shown that between 60 to 90% of gender dysphoric teens will grow out of their dysphoria. Yeah, but almost all people who transition go on to have wanted their transition. Meaning, hey, get ready for it, guys. Do you know what the purpose of gender clinics are? To determine what types of gender dysphoria warrant transition and which don't. That's literally the reason we have hormone blockers. Do you think like these gender clinics are just like a kid comes in and they're like, I don't know if I'm really a girl, and the clinic's like, all right, time to get this strap on bolted to your groin. Like, no, the whole point is the process of determining the validity and the medical necessity of these very, very influential and consequential lifetime, decisions. So the fact that the vast majority of trans people are happy with their transition and improve after their transition is an argument against this. These two data points cannot exist simultaneously. Oh, what's this? The end of the 85% desistance myth. Even with a cursory awareness of issues relating to transgender children, you would have heard the 85% desistance myth. Some old and flawed research studies that lump together large numbers of gender nonconforming cisgender children with transgender children claimed astonishingly high levels of supposed desistance, i.e., children who hold a cisgender, not transgender, identity after puberty. These studies are flawed in many ways, including in their analysis, where they assume that children who could not be contacted or declined to be interviewed were all so-called desisters. What? Just someone didn't pick up the phone and they were like, yep, that's a blow against the transgender ideology. These statistics often relied upon older data from the 70s and 80s, which is, by the way, 70s and 80s is literally irrelevant from the perspective of, like, transgender issues. Spoiler, it might be as low as 4% desistance? I haven't heard the term desistance before. Interesting. I'll need to look through all of this to make sure that I can get the best citations possible. But whatever the case may be, I don't need to disprove this desistance myth in order to like disprove the point that J.K. Rowling is making here. The fact that gender transition has an overwhelmingly positive impact on the people who experience, gender transition is all the evidence I need to prove that this is not a medical concern. Again and again, I've been told to just meet some trans people. I have. I've met some. They were all adorable. I know a self-described transsexual woman. I love it. Self-described trans woman. Can't just say trans woman. Have self-described. She calls herself a woman, you know. Although she's open about her past as a gay man, I mean, at least we're using the right pronoun, I've always found it hard to think of her as anything other than a woman, and I believe and hope she's completely happened to have transitioned. Being older, though, she went through a long and rigorous process of evaluation, psychotherapy, and stage transformation. What does that mean? The current explosion of trans activism is urging a removal of almost all the robust systems through which candidates for sex reassignments were once required to pass. Ah, yes, the medical process for transitioning was better 40 years ago when there was no straightforward medical path. Nobody had any data on anything, and you had to wait until you're like 25 to even have a chance. Ah, yes, that's the medical consensus. It was better back when we knew less, and did worse. A man who intends to have no surgery and take no hormones may secure himself a gender recognition certificate and be a woman in the sight of the law. Many people aren't aware of this. And? So are you a TERF or a trans medicalist now, J.K. Rowling? Do you have to take hormones and surgery? Or is it just like no trans women or women? Is this a trans medicalist perspective? Also, by the way, I would love for you to find me like this tremendous problem of like men who identify as men dishonestly like gaming the system to be women for what exactly? I think she's jumping between trans medicalist and transphobe outright, like whenever it's most convenient. So here she gets to be the trans medicalist where she supports the real trans people, even though like the rest of this is just open like TERF dogma. We're living through the most misogynistic period I've experienced. Maybe that might be conceivable. The internet like culture has made like exposure to misogyny online like probably does amplify, at least from J.K. Rowling's perspective. The fact that she's online now probably does amplify a lot of misogyny. That's a perspective thing. I won't argue that. Online, but in real life, online is real life, baby. I don't actually exist. I'm just a computer program. Hello. Back in the 80s, I imagined that my future daughter, should I have any, would have it far better than I ever did. But between the backlash against feminism, which is done by far-right people who you're signal boosting, and a porn-saturated online culture, we're doing the swerf! We're doing it! Porn-saturated online culture, I believe things have gotten significantly worse for girls. Buddy, if you have a problem with online misogyny, target conservatives. Don't target porn. Like, trust me, when there's backlash against women online, it's not being done by well-meaning feminists who are corrupted by porn. It's being done by open fucking, like, fascists and misogynists, okay? Target those people. I believe things have gotten significantly worse for girls. Sure, like maybe an online treatment, but in the real world, that's factually not the case. Never have I seen women denigrated and dehumanized to the extent they are now. Bitch, back in the 1980s, have you ever seen Mad Men? The culture of like workplace sexism was so overwhelming back then. The glass ceiling, like, no, okay. Listen, I'll give you like the idea that like online harassment right now is pretty bad. What about the witch hunts? She says in her lifetime, guys. Yeah, like the idea that women have it worse in the real life now than they did 40 years ago is pretty dumb. From the leader of the free world's long history of sexual assault accusations and his proud boast of grabbing them by the pussy, to the incel movement that rages against women who won't give them sex, to the trans activists who declare that TERFs need punching and re-educating. Whoa! Notice that weird jump there. So first we have Trump being a misogynist, which is true, because talking about sexually assaulting women. Then we have incels hating women, and then we have trans activists hating TERFs. A little bit of a difference there. Women are women because they're women. TERFs, that's an ideology. I think it's totally okay to hate TERFs. Shouldn't hate women, should hate TERFs. Very easy. I hate male TERFs too. One of the most prominent TERFs online, period, is Lindsey Graham. Glinner on Twitter. That dipshit. That's like the primo TERF online, that simpering little. When I think of male feminist, by the way, in like a derogatory way, I think of Glinner. Glinner to me is like the definition of somebody who like every political opinion he expresses is like in service of him. Oh, Graham Lindsay? Wait, Graham Lineham? Oh, Lindsey Graham is the senator guy. Well, he's probably also a transphobe. No, Graham Linehan, sorry. Glinner, yeah. Sorry, British people, fucking oopsie daisy Britbonger land, got everything all mixed up. Graham Lindsay. Yeah, Graham Linehan. Okay, there we go. Look at this is a English comedian, by the way. Have you guys seen the fucking, this guy tweets fucking nonstop. Really cringy stuff. Look at it. His one goal in life is to protect the biological females by making fun of trans and non-binary people. Where was that? He tweets so fucking much. And you see he's tweeting a lot about J.K. Rowling, because where was it? Here we go. I'm Graham, and I just came out right now as non-binary, and I can't wait to explore my gender with you all. Have you ever seen more of a rapist than this man? This is a British comedian. Look at him. I just like the way this guy acts. He's such a reply guy. His wife divorced him recently. Yeah, it's pretty fitting. Recently, he responded to Anita Sarkeesian tweeting by saying something. Anita Sarkeesian was saying some pro-trans thing, and he was like, "I defended you back during Gamergate. Shame to see you buy into the dogma," or something like that. He's constantly replying to like women to like defend them. It's really creepy. It comes across in his analytics too. He's nailing those hits. Anyway, he's just like, when I think of TERF, he's Irish, not British. I don't care. There's Americans and then there's non-Americans. When I think of TERF, I think of Glinner. Like, he's like the #1 Deuterino. Isn't he the guy that got H Bomber Guy to do the trans rights charity stream? Yep, this is the guy who was trying to attack that like trans youth charity, the Mermaid Foundation in England or whatever. And then H Bomber Guy raised $250,000. The mermaids, yeah. And then H Bomber Guy raised a fuck ton of money. Anyway. Back at it. Men across the political spectrum seem to agree. Women are asking for trouble. Well, actually, no, just trans activists. Hold on. Notice that little pivot right there. Trans activists who declare that TERFs need punching and re-educating, assuming that trans activists are men and all TERFs are women. Nice dichotomization there. I thought you were a feminist. Everywhere, women are being told to shut up and sit down or else, implying that people who don't like TERFs are the same as Trump. Very good. I've read all the arguments about femaleness not residing in the sexed body and the assertions that biological women don't have common experiences. Whoa! Nobody has ever made the argument that people who are assigned female at birth don't have like common experiences. I've said that on this stream. I'll say it again. As a cis man, there are some things that I have more in common with trans women than I do with cisgender women, because of how we were born, because of some features of our biology, and because of how society treats us. That doesn't make them men. It just means we have some things in common. I have a lot of stuff in common with other American women, probably more so than I do with like Chinese women, but they're still women. Like, my proximity to their life experiences has nothing to do with whether or not their gender identity is valid. And I find them too deeply misogynistic and regressive, the true victim here. It's also clear that one of the objectives of denying the importance of sex, nobody does this. Nobody does this. Nobody. I've never seen anyone. It is a fact that sex is bimodal and not a binary, but that's a commonly held scientific position. Nobody said, find me, who's saying this? Sex isn't important. Who's saying this? Sex doesn't exist? Who? I've seen one link from one professor saying it once. Is that it? Is that the entire discourse right there? I found a dude who debated JLP who said it. Well, it's not commonly held in any of the broader medical or like pro-trans communities. Oh, JBP, okay? I bet that JBP debate opponent was the same person who said it in that one interview. This is not a commonly held position. This is the reason why people like J.K. Rowling refrain from specifically targeting their criticisms against any one person or any one idea. It is the same person? Oh, it's the same person then. The same guy who said sex isn't real in like a statement to the media also said sex isn't real in a debate with JBP. The what? We found it. We found the one person. I'm sure there are a few prominent people who have made claims like this. It's not a commonly held belief. So to define your entire opposition as some people who deny the importance of sex, whatever the fuck that means, is incredibly dishonest. Anyway, one of the objectives of that is to erode what some seem to see as the cruelly segregationist idea of women having their own biological realities, or just as threatening, unifying realities that make them a cohesive political class. What? Trans people are a deliberate objective to undermine the political cohesion of women? How? What does that mean? Ah, yes, the radical misogynists invented the trans people as a secret weapon to deploy against the cis women. What the fuck are you talking about? It isn't enough for women to be trans allies. Women must admit and accept there's no material difference between trans women and themselves. Yeah, there are differences between trans women and cisgender women. That's it. But yeah, everyone believes that. Who doesn't believe that? Hey, hypers, if you're trans in chat and you agree that there are differences between cis men trans men and cis women trans women, do those differences make them any less the gender they identify as? No. Are there differences? Yes. It's easy. This is so easy. That's it. It's so easy. It's so easy. It's nothing. No two individual women are the same. Two cis women can differ in height. They can have different skin tones. Their voice intonations can be different. There are differences between any individuals. Of course, there are differences between cis and trans women. There are also differences between right-handed and left-handed women. But those differences don't make them any more or less women. That's it. That's all you have to do. That's all you have to believe, J.K. Rowling. It's so easy. We're leaving it open to you. This is like Sargon of Akkad language right here. But as many women have said before me, women is not a costume. Okay. Don't think anyone is saying it is. Woman is not an idea in a man's head. I mean, woman is an idea. It's an idea in like a person's head. Like it's a social construct. So it could be in a man's head or a woman. I mean, it's in someone's head. I don't know if it's necessarily a man's. We need to track down the one person in society who has the social construct of woman in their head. You did this much better in this video. Oh, I remember this.
There's a difference between. All I'm saying is that there's a difference between trans women and women.
Yeah, there's a difference between black women and white women, but they're both women, aren't they? So trans women and cis women are like different in some respects. They're both equally women. There's a difference between tall and short women, big booby and little booby and no booby woman, black and white woman, but they are all women all the same. Cis woman and trans woman, curly hair woman and straight hair woman. That is not a curly hair woman at all. They are all woman all the same. I agree. Yes.
And woman.
Huh?
What is a woman though?
What is a woman? Anyone who identifies as a woman.
A man with a penis is also just the same as a woman.
No, they would have to identify as a woman, in which case they would stop being a man. Women can have penises, women can have beards, women can have big fucking dick. However big your dick is, women dick, 3 times as big. Every last one of them. Women can have prostates, women can fucking give birth and make other people give birth. Women can be lots of things. All you have to do is identify as one.
So there's no point in even having the word woman.
Yes! Yes! My gender abolitionist comrade. Thank you. Yes! We're on it now. And that concludes our course on gender constructivist theory in the 21st century. Thank you. I feel like we've been doing this. I feel like we've been doing this fucking TERF manifesto for a while. Maybe we should speak a little faster. So this is basically her like saying that womanhood is anything other than biology is is sexism. And here we go. I have known this is a thing, but it's finally time for us to arrive at it. Which brings me to the fifth reason I'm deeply concerned about the consequences of my current trans activism. If everyone has their yikes preferred yikes emote available, it's time for us to get into it. I've been in the public eye now for over 20 years and have never talked publicly about being a domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor. This isn't because I'm ashamed those things happened to me, but because they're traumatic to revisit and remember. I also feel protective of my daughter from my first marriage. I didn't want to claim sole ownership of a story that belongs to her, too. However, a short while ago, I asked her how she'd feel if I were publicly honest about that part of my life, and she encouraged me to go ahead. I'm mentioning these things now not in an attempt to garner sympathy, right? But out of solidarity with the huge numbers of women who have histories like mine who have been slurred as bigots for having concerns around single-sex spaces. I managed to escape my first violent marriage with some difficulty, but I'm now married to a truly good and principled man, safe and secure in ways I never in a million years expected to be. However, the scars left by violence and sexual assault don't disappear. No, we're priming the fuck out of this. No matter how loved you are, and no matter how much money you've made. My perennial jumpiness is a family joke, and even I know it's funny, but I pray my daughters never have the same reasons I do for hating sudden loud noises or finding people behind me when I haven't heard them approaching. If you could come inside my head and understand what I feel when I read about a trans woman dying at the hands of a violent man, you would find solidarity and kinship. A very high bar. She sympathizes with a murder victim. I have a visceral sense of the terror in which those trans women will have spent their last seconds on Earth, because I too have known moments of blind fear when I realized the only thing keeping me alive was the shaky self-restraint of my attacker. I should be noted that whatever dumb shit is coming after all this, I do sympathize severely with the extent to which women are subjected to violence. I mean, when everyone's subjected to violence, like, that's bad, but it's obviously a sort of gender-aligned thing. I believe the majority of trans-identified people not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable for all the reasons I've outlined. Trans people need and deserve protection. Like women, they're most likely to be killed by sexual partners. Trans women who work in the sex industry, particularly trans women of color, are at particular risk. We're getting all the woke points in here, but what is it building up to? Like every other domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor, I know I feel nothing but empathy and solidarity with trans women who have been abused by men. So I want trans women to be safe. Here it comes! At the same way, I do not want to make natal girls. What a disgusting term. What? That's such a gross way to. I don't know. Maybe that's just my preference. Natal girls and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, you can't say trans woman earlier and then use the term man who believes or feels he's a woman. And as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones. Then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth. So here we get to the final meme, the trans bathroom bill. This is it. This is always the heart of the disingenuous we need to protect women thing. And I'll answer it when we're done with this section. On Saturday morning, I read the Scottish government is proceeding with its controversial gender recognition plans. That might mean controversial in public opinion, but not in medical. Which will in effect mean that all a man needs to become a woman is to say he's one, based. To use a very contemporary word, I was triggered. Good. Ground down by the relentless attacks from trans activists on social media when I was only there to give children feedback about pictures they'd drawn for my book under lockdown, I spent much of Saturday in a very dark place inside my head, as memories of a serious sexual assault I suffered in my 20s recurred on a loop. That assault happened to me at a time and in a place where I was vulnerable, and a man capitalized on such an opportunity. I couldn't shut out the memories, and I was finding it hard to contain my anger and disappointment about the way I believe my government is playing fast and loose with women and girls' safety. Well, if you believe that to be the case, then you must have some data on the idea that trans women pose a threat to cis women in bathrooms. Sorry, bitch, but your trauma isn't an argument. You realize that, right? Like, you're unironically doing what the anti-SJWs say. Like, this is just you getting triggered and using feels over reals. You don't have any data on this. You literally just got upset, and that to you was an argument. You think you're going to buy my sympathy from this? Use your hurt as a weapon against other people? who are also hurting? You think that's like a good argument? Am I feeling compelled by this? Weak. Late on Saturday evening, scrolling through children's pictures before I went to bed, I forgot the first rule of Twitter: never ever expect a nuanced conversation, and reacted to what I felt like was degrading language about women. I spoke up about the importance of sex. Hey, if you have a problem with the degrading language of women, there are like a million things you can do on Twitter that have nothing to do with trans people. If you have an issue with degrading language about women, but you seem to keep finding yourself in arguments about the validity of trans people, your issue might not actually be with degrading language about women. Your issue might be with trans people. I spoke up about the importance of sex and have been paying the price ever since. Again, spoke up about the importance of sex. No meaningful statement here, just a vacuous dog whistle. I was transphobic. Yep. I was a cunt. I was a bitch. True. A TERF. Undisputably. I deserved cancellation. Yeah, why not? Punching. I didn't say that. And death. Hey, on the internet, listen, you get these accusations no matter what. I'm not making these claims. And when people in my chat say that you do deserve these things, they're being ironic, okay? You are Voldemort, said one person, clearly feeling this was the only language I'd understand. Well, I don't know. I mean, whatever reaches you, right? Notice how no actual like tweet is provided here, or the actual language of the tweet. Again, play it fast and loose, be abstract with the things that you've done, be abstract with everything. It makes it so much easier to argue. It would be so much easier to tweet out the approved hashtags, because of course trans rights are human rights, and of course trans lives matter. Scoop up the woke cookies and bask in the virtue signaling afterglow. Ah, you're doing it. It's so virtue signally to not be transphobic. Nice meme. If you have issues with trans stuff, you could just not tweet about it. I have controversial opinions that I don't tweet about. I haven't tweeted my opinions on JRPGs. I don't tweet, even though ContraPoints agrees with me. The trans women nya, catgirl, uwu shit is actually pretty annoying and juvenile, and I don't like it. Listen, if there are controversial opinions that you hold and you don't want to get like dogpiled for, you can just keep them right here in your heart, my duderino. You don't have to. Nobody's forcing you to go ahead and put that out in the ether. There's joy, relief, and safety in conformity, and in being technically correct. As Simone de Beauvoir also wrote, without a doubt, it is more comfortable to endure a blind bondage than to work for one's liberation. Oh my god. Blind bondage to support trans people, and liberation is saying trans women aren't women. Holy shit. Stretch that definition further. Dude, Simone de Beauvoir was a fucking sick-ass feminist back in her era. If she was here today, she would be like a trans advocate. There was no fucking way Simone de Beauvoir, who framed the suppression of women not as a biological reality, but as an expression of class politics and an anthropological reality, there was no fucking way someone as based as Simone back in her day would not today be a radical supporter of trans rights. Okay? Do not fucking, she is turning in her fucking grave right now. Do not fucking invoke this language if you are not willing to back up the implications of her beliefs. She, at no point did Simone go like, oh yeah, well, like, women are oppressed because like our biology, our natal pussy flaps are men, their broad shoulders allow them to rape easier, and that's why the bathrooms need to be separate. No, she wasn't as stupid as you. Huge numbers of women are justifiably terrified by the trans act. Oh, grow the fuck up. I know this because so many have gotten in touch with me to tell their stories. They're afraid of doxing, of losing their jobs, their livelihoods, and of violence. Damn, it's almost like what you go through being just a regular trans person online, except you guys get the added benefit of having terrible opinions. But endlessly Wait, did we not even have a point to the earlier fucking I was sexually assaulted point? Oh, here's the actual point. I'm really sorry. There's no data to indicate that having trans women and cis women spaces leads to an increase in like harm or violence done against them. And additionally, if you have trans women forced into men's spaces, they are vastly more likely to have violence inflicted against them. The amount of violence done against women decreases when trans women are in women's spaces. Additionally, when trans women do engage against violence against cisgender women, that's already illegal. It's already illegal. If a person who follows this crazy Scotland law goes into a woman's bathroom where there's only one woman, and the guy, this is a guy who's faking being a woman, is like, "Hey, I'm a woman, haha. Now I'm gonna rape you." Okay, that's illegal. That's still a crime. They didn't have to identify as a woman to do that. They could have just done that. They could have gone in and said, I'm a man. Now I'm gonna rape you. They can just do that. The rape was already illegal. Your defense against rape wasn't the fact that people with penises and people with vaginas are separate. Your defense against rape is the illegality of rape. That is the defense against rape. The real funny thing is that homophobes will very often cite the fact that lesbian relationships have a high rate of interpartner violence as an argument against the stability of gay relationships. And there are a lot of arguments against that. But the funny thing is, the rate of violence domestically between cis women in cis female relationships is actually pretty high, which is an argument against the idea that, like, the inclusion of trans women in women's spaces is an addition of violence which wasn't prescient before. All right, we got to wrap this up. But endlessly unpleasant as its constant targeting of me has been, boo-hoo, you literal fucking billionaire, I refuse to bow down to a movement that I believe is doing demonstrable harm and seeking to erode woman as a political and biological class and offering cover to predators like few before it. Wow, that is a heated statement right there. First of all, you refuse to bow down. Congrats to you, snowflake. Way to virtue signal, like you were just joking about earlier. Second of all, demonstrable harm, except you haven't demonstrated it. Third of all, erode woman as a political and class is not happening. Woman still exists as a as a political class, and there's no such thing as a biological class of woman. If you mean the sex of like assigned female at birth people, that the term, that categorization is and always will be useful and always will be used, particularly in the medical field where it is immediately relevant. It's not being eroded in any sense. So the political isn't being eroded, and the biological isn't being eroded because the invocation of gender ideology can't change the instances in which biological sex is relevant. And as for offering to cover for predators, fucking prove it, bitch. Find it. Data. Why is every single piece of data you provided thus far easily disprovable? You're a billionaire. If you wanted to, you could have had this written by the most fucking academically advanced TERFs on the fucking planet. Where is it? Where you literally cited data so bad that it got the people who wrote it laughed out of the industry. Do you think that might be a condemnation of your opinions? A little bit? That all the people who agree with you were so bad at their job that they were, like, disbarred? Is that something that concerns you, maybe? Or are you just, like, a full-blown conspiracy theorist? Do you have, like, any opinions on Jewish people? Maybe. I remember some of those funny tweets from yours. Somebody tweeted at you, like, are there any Jewish wizards at Hogwarts? And they said, like, Adam Goldstein or something like that. Or the way the goblins in the bank in Harry Potter. I don't know. Like, maybe you got, the goblin bankers. Maybe you got some weird stuff about Jews, too. I don't know. You're certainly acting like the types of people who do. I stand alongside the brave women and men, gay, straight, and trans, no, you don't, who are standing up for freedom of speech and thought. Everyone here is. Your freedom of speech isn't being violated. And for the rights and safety of some of the most vulnerable in our society. Trans people. Trans people are the most vulnerable in our society. Mathematically, that is the most vulnerable group in our society. That's it. That is who we are standing up for. Young gay kids, standing up for them. Fragile teenagers, standing up for them because supporting their gender transition significantly decreases the likelihood of their suicidality. And women who are reliant on and wish to retain their single-sex spaces. Hey, you know who else wanted to retain the purity of their women's spaces? white women after the Civil Rights Act was passed. They made the same arguments. White women. We don't want those dirty blacks in here. This is our space. They're more violent, don't you know? You're on the wrong side of history, JK. Every argument you make has been made by people who are disproven and buried by history centuries or decades ago. The exact same argument. Hey, guess what? The white women back then also didn't have any studies on how allowing black women into their spaces would increase violence. So, hey, where the fuck are yours? Polls show those women are in the vast majority. I don't care if bigotry is popular, and exclude only those privileged or lucky enough never to have come up against male violence or sexual assault. Female trans activists are privileged because they've never been sexually assaulted. Hypers, if you're in chat, you've been sexually assaulted and you believe in trans rights anyway. Because you don't let your fucking, your biases and your abuse be used as a weapon against other people. Like, I've been raped, so like, who cares if other people are? Yeah, I didn't think so. The one thing that gives me hope is that the women who can protest and organize are doing so, and they have some truly decent men and trans people alongside them. Always men and trans. It's gender and trans people. Political parties seeking to appeal to the loudest voices in this debate are ignoring women's concerns at their peril. Wait, if the political parties are appeasing the loudest voices, except for, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, and Donald Trump, the President of the United States, who are both radically anti-trans, and Donald Trump literally just a few days ago repealed medical rights for trans people, so I don't know what you mean by loudest voices. I thought you just said the vast majority of women are, like, pro-biological sex, or whatever stupid fucking terminology you use. It's a little bit like fascism. At once your enemy must be weak and easily defeated, but also overwhelming and strong. An inability to accurately assess the threat level of your opponents is one of the defining characteristics of fascism, as is exclusionary behavior. None of the gender-critical women I've talked to hate trans people. On the contrary, yeah, I've talked to a lot of Nazis who don't hate black people, too. That's what they tell me. They just think we're all better in our separate spaces. Yeah, just like you. Irrelevant. All of it's irrelevant. Irrelevant. Irrelevant! Get it out of here. I'm done. Weak. If that's the TERF manifesto, I never need debate a TERF again, because they will never have a point for me that I will not be ready to respond with.